obviously the big story still what's going on in Iran. And I thought it was funny yesterday. Go back and watch yesterday's show, preferably on Rumble Mobile, where all the Chads are watching it. And like Andrew literally predicted 10 minutes before Trump put out his statement, like basically what was going to happen. Don't take my word for it. Go check. So there's a lot of hubbub, a lot of people with different takes. I thought we'd start with this once more, a post from Trump's social media. So this was last evening. He ended up posting. He says, the United States will work closely with Iran, which we have determined has gone through what will be a very productive regime change. There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the United States will, working with Iran, dig up and remove all of the buried B-2 bombers' nuclear dust. It is now and has been under the very exacting satellite surveillance Space Force. Nothing has been touched from the date of the attack. We are and will be talking tariff and sanctions relief with Iran. Many of the 15 points have already been agreed to. Thanks for your attention, Donald Trump. So it appears that he's very optimistic here, that he's talked with new people in the regime and thinks he could work with them to collect the remnants of the uranium and any nuclear material. But if you read between the lines, it seems that he suggests to say, we're going to stay there to make sure this happens. This isn't like we're just going to take their word for it.
Well, there was another prediction yesterday. You remember? It was near the end of the show. Who did I predict the poison pill could be here?
Israel.
Do you remember? Israel.
Yeah.
That Israel, you got to be really careful with these peace agreements because Israel could easily end up being the poison pill. And it looks like they really want to be the poison pill. So a whole bunch of stuff happened shortly after that show went offline. The first thing that happened is CNN and what Trump refers to as the fake news media ran with a fake story. So on X, somebody was claiming that the Iranian state media had released what these various points of agreement were going to be for these peace accords. And that story was completely and totally fake. That was not actually what was agreed to. And they began running with that as though it was true. Trump put out on True Social that was completely fake, totally fabricated, and that it had not been revealed to the public. Now, there was some insane shit in there that should have been a red flag to anybody who's not a complete idiot. For instance, that the UN was going to take all sanctions off of Iran. That should easily have been the red flag that everybody needed to know that was probably a bullshit story, but they ran with it anyway. As of this morning, the Israelis have continued to hit Lebanon. The referent is that according to the, quote, peace accords or this 10-point plan, the Lebanese were to be untouchable. However, that's not actually confirmed as of right now. None of this is actually confirmed yet. So that's kind of our story so far, right, Rob?
Yeah, and if you bring it up here, Mystery, here's the actual post you're talking about. So Trump puts out, this one hitting near and dear to my heart. The alleged statement put out by CNN World News is a fraud, as CNN well knows. The false statement was linked to a fake news site from Nigeria, and of course immediately picked up by CNN and blared out as legitimate headline. The official statement by Iran was just released and posted on Truth below. Authorities are looking to determine whether or not a crime was committed on the issuance of fake CNN World statement or a sick word player. Maybe that wasn't the exact one, but there is, this is about the 10-point plan. Trump's rejecting it, saying that that's not what's going on, that there wasn't this 10-point plan. Caroline Levitt came out today and said that it was bullshit, and that actually people don't know what they're talking about, basically, the negotiations between Trump's team and Iran ongoing. Now, there was some people that obviously want to sabotage this. This is one of my favorite clips. Here's notable Israel apologist Mark Levine, not too happy last night to hear that there may be peace talks.
People of Iran, what are we going to just leave them there? There's nothing that we can do and we're going to wash our hands over that? That to me is morally very difficult to accept. And then what about the proxies, Hezbollah? I was reading these statements. Hezbollah has killed more Americans than Iran directly. Hezbollah is Iran. Hezbollah is firing missiles into Israel by the hundreds still. And here we have a ceasefire that they've already broken. And so, yes, the argument will be, well, they don't have control of this and control of that. Well, if they don't have control of this and control of that, how do we even enter into an agreement? There's a lot of complicated issues.
And so I think that gives you a good idea of where a lot of the pro-Israel faction in the United States is, and probably where Israel themselves are. There is a vested interest from a lot of people, including in Israel, to not want a peace deal.
Well, Israel wants to be the Middle Eastern hegemon. Like they essentially right now, Iran is, right? They are kind of the hegemonic power in that region as of right now. Even though they don't have nukes, they seem to be the regional power and a respectable regional power that nobody wants to f with. But Israel definitely wants to be the hegemon there, as the United States is the hegemon in the West and basically over the entire world. They want Iran gone. They want not just the government gone. They want Israeli citizens to be able to occupy those lands if possible. They consider them their greatest enemy, and by hook or by crook, they want to expand a war into Iran proper. There's no doubt about that. Levin has been promoting that for years, ever since he was a talk radio show host, filling in for guys like Rush Limbaugh and others. Yep. He's been promoting that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think you're right. That is the poison pill, right? All you need is Israel to say, there was some attack on us, now we're justified in attacking Iran, which throws the whole deal like in the shitter. So I hope that Trump's Laura Loomer was out there today, very similar. You can see sort of the anxiety, which I think is the best news I've had in weeks, watching people like this squirm. Look, there is a case to be made that possibly with Iran trying to get nuclear weapons, etc., that this needed to occur. But it's one thing, and I think you're in agreement with this, Trump's not really a Bushite. He's not that type of neocon. Trump did this, it's sort of a one-off type thing. These people, it's a way of life. They want Iran wiped out, they don't want them to exist, and then they want to go to the next group. And so I think that you're starting to see some pushback from a lot of these people that temporarily were, praising Trump to the moon. He could do no wrong when he was bombing Iran. And now the idea of peace, they're like, wait, not so fast.
Yeah, that they were the poison pill. The problem is that this was appears, at least this is a cursory news so far, to be a bilateral negotiation between the United States and Iran, brokered by Pakistan, right? That's the news. Now, Israel wasn't given a seat at the table for these negotiations. And so they may not be restrained by those negotiations. However, that gives cause for the United States, if the Israelis want to conduct warfare, to back off on any support for that warfare. And if that's the case and Israel has to unilaterally do that, there's now a big problem because they don't have the war strength to go up unilaterally against these nations.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. Now, another thing that was happening, and listen, I think it's perfectly reasonable to criticize Trump. In fact, I think Trump's unique in that of all the presidents in my lifetime, because he's not a big ideologue, in my opinion, sometimes he listens to his audience. So you remember in his first term, he's like, bump stocks, get rid of him. And then his entire base is like, what? No. And he's like, oh, never mind. He's not really an ideologue. He sort of listens to where the wind's blowing. And that's
he's a populist.
Yeah, it's a positive and a negative. So to watch all these people last night, I thought this was so funny. The same people that were like, oh my God, Trump's going to nuke Iran and it's going to be the end of the world, were like, taco, Trump chickens out again.
Yeah.
It's like they're never going to be happy, right? And so for me, it's like, if you wanted a peace deal, right now it looks like we're at least approaching that. Hopefully we keep through with it. So it was really funny to hear all these people talk about Trump chickening out. If you wonder, this is the administration's sort of, go ahead.
Well, they're in heavily entrenched camps right now. Rather than taking a more wait and see approach, as this was something which was just announced, is it now about 24 hours ago, roughly?
Yep.
And instead of taking a wait and see approach to see how a lot of this is shaking out, every political online camp especially, wants to be the first in with the take, and they're going to defend that take. That take's going to be correct no matter what. So if you are a progressive piece of human garbage, of course you're going to dunk on Trump for this no matter what. You'll see the more alt-right or dissident right creators also hitting Trump pretty hard on this because, of course, they want Iran to have been a disaster, regardless of if it is a disaster or isn't one, right? So everyone is entrenched in these different camps. They all want to be right, and so they're all trying to spin this to their advantage. Interestingly enough, the zone has been flooded again with tons and tons of fake news on X. I see people retweeting shit. When I check it out, it's completely and totally untrue immediately. We just don't know a lot right now. That's the actual truth, and that's not very satisfying for people, but that is what is actually true.
Yeah, you know, I say the same thing. I know you say it on your show as well that we do independently. It's not the most exciting thing as an audience. You want that hot take, but if you're if you're willing to admit, look, we don't know how this will turn out. We're giving our impressions, and then we judge once we see results like a week, 2 weeks on. I think you'll find that that has more utility as commentators than just trying to come out with your hot take right out of the gate and then being wrong 50% of the time. For their stance, the administration obviously is going to talk about how they think this crippled Iran's nuclear program. Here's one of the big things that they're going to say. So if you say Trump didn't accomplish anything, here's Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, talking about how many people in Iran's regime they've taken out.
Their top leadership was systematically eliminated. The previous Iranian Supreme Leader, dead. The Supreme National Security Council Secretary, dead. The Supreme Leader Office Advisor, dead. The Supreme Leader Military Office Chief, dead. The Defense Minister, no longer with us. The IRGC Commander, dead. The Armed Forces General Staff Commander, dead. The Intelligence Minister, dead. The IRGC Navy Commander, no longer here.
His whole top command, too.
Intel Chief, dead.
Yep. And also he could have said, and that one guy that took over. Right, so we bombed them into. How about that? But that is, for better or worse, that's going to be one of the things that you hear when all of this fallout ends. No matter what sort of deal we see, there has been a radical change, at least in the bodies that's running Iran now. What the next?
Yeah, they're going to bank on that for regime change.
Yep.
They're going to say we did get regime change because we killed the old regime. They didn't get much of an ideological difference, though. It seems like, again, the new bosses are the same as the old bosses. So, but Trump also caveated this by saying he doesn't care about having an ideological change so much as he cares about having people who are willing to negotiate on his terms for the things that he wants. But the administration's massive failure here has been to package what those aims actually are in a coherent way to the American people. They have not been able to accomplish that in a very good fashion. And so they have been getting pummeled by both sides on this issue because they cannot coherently articulate what the goals and aims were. It seems that they're going to package it as it was regime change, disarming any potential for enrichment of uranium, any potential for a nuclear weapon. That's what they were there to do. Trump will say it was a very short conflict and that they achieved all of the goals that they had with minimal loss to American lives. Now, if that had been packaged better, he probably could have walked away with massive victory. But right now, the biggest confusion that I see from people is that they don't exactly understand what the goals here were. What were the actual goals? What was the point of this if we end up right back in the same position we were, minus a few less ragheads, right? What was the actual goal here?
Yeah, and there's no one to blame but Trump's administration themselves. Remember, Rubio, who I think's been very articulate, he comes out and was like, the reason there was immediacy was because Israel was about to attack, and we had actionable intelligence that then Iran would have attacked the United States' interest. And it's like, oh, so Israel? They were the ones that, no. Then they come the next day, and it's like, well, that's not what we meant. So I agree with you on that. We do see, though, they're trying to salvage at least this time frame. So here we have Carolyn Levitt, and she's going to remind you, and again, we'll see. This ceasefire might only last until the end of this show, and then all of a sudden it could be back on. But if things work out as Trump's claiming to hope, here's Carolyn Levitt talking about what their prediction was for this conflict at the beginning.
From the very beginning of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump stated this would be a 4 to 6 week military operation to dismantle the military threat posed by the radical Islamic Iranian regime.
That is true. That is actually factually correct. Trump did say that this would be a limited conflict, about 4 to 6 weeks. He predicted maybe a couple of months at the outside, but he did say that was one of the things that he did put on the table almost right away, is that this was not going to be a prolonged war. And Benjamin Netanyahu actually backed that and said the same thing. He said this is not going to be an elongated conflict. So that is one thing that Trump has in his corner, is that his administration was pretty clear on that from the outset, that this was going to be a something which was a limited scope as far as a military operation went. And he did not foresee boots on the ground either. He foresaw this as being an basically air and naval action, without there being any concise troops on the ground, boots on the ground.
We'll leave her finish here real quick.
Thanks to the unbelievable capabilities of America's war fighters, the United States has achieved and exceeded those core military objectives in just 38 days.
So
what are they, though?
well, that's the point.
But
the
what
time
were
frame,
they?
they're right. But what is what was the whole point exactly?
Yeah,
you know?
that's the problem that we're not getting good clarification on. And I think that the administration, I do think that there were clear objectives that they had. I think that the objective that they had was that they were trying to cripple Iran and put them in a worse negotiating stage for future negotiations when it came to their nuclear program and other things like this. I think that was part of the operation, but they were not very clear on what the purpose of it was overall. And so that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. People are not very clear on what the hell we're there fighting them for. They're just not clear on it.
And the other problem with this is, I think look, let's say this ends in peace and there's not one more bomb dropped by the United States here and we end up coming back. That's a great talking point. Look, we said 4 to 6 weeks. We accomplished that. What happens if it doesn't work out? Then if I'm someone who wants to criticize Trump, I'm like, you were just out there touting on April 8th that you were celebrating. It would be very reminiscent of George Bush's mission accomplished. Remember that? It was, mission accomplished. We did it. So yeah, I think if they fall within this time frame, good on them for accurately predicting. And it does assuage a lot of the fears people had that this was going to be the next Iraq or Afghanistan. But we're not over yet. So we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, so I've heard this point quite a bit. Hegseth, Rubio, Kane, all of them have listed the 3 objectives over and over. The objectives are pretty clear if you read them. That has no bearing on what I'm saying here. Even if it was the case that they were very clear on what their objectives were from the very beginning, they were very poor at articulating those objectives to the American public. That's what the criticism is. If more people than not don't know what the objectives were supposed to be at all, then they're not doing a very good job on selling the American people on them. So always try to remember what is true, right? It could very well be true that Trump and the administration had clear-cut objectives, but it's also equally true that they have done a very poor job of selling them to the American public, because the American public is very confused about what the conflict is about at all.
It's very weird to have this conversation with an audience, and I'll tell you why. The mere fact that we're streaming politics, or you're watching people stream politics, puts you as probably more interested and informed than an average member of the public. And the problem is, you might say, well, I've watched a lot of these press conferences and I know, but does your guy that's working at the local deli or your roofer know? Probably not. And a lot of that is because mixed messaging, or they're not using their platforms as best as possible. And I think this has been a problem with Trump even in the first administration. A lot of what he's suggesting is very popular. It's just, can you pierce through the massive sort of control of the narrative that his enemies seem to have? And I think they could do a much better job. They should have been clear, focused. Watch the Democrats push something. They'll have like simple sound bites and they push it over and over and over and over and over again. Trump's team should have did something like that, like real 3-point objective.
Yeah, Trick says he wasn't trying to sell the American people on this topic, I don't think. That's pure cope, man. Look, every administration is going to have to sell the American people on every topic. That's part of what the entire public outreach program from the office of the presidency is about. That's what those press conferences are about. That's what the press releases are all about. It's all propaganda from the Oval Office in order to sell you on what the ideas are. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes they do need to sell you on what the ideas are, at least keep you informed of them. But public support and ongoing public support is particularly important for Trump, because that's always been his shield. He doesn't always get a shield when it comes to the law or when it comes to political persecution. The only thing that has been his shield from any of that has been the public at large. So he really does have to bank on their support for the things that he does.
Yep, totally agree. And then, there's a lot tangentially, maybe we'll get into it more. Carolyn Levitt talks about NATO and their utility going forward. Trump seems to be pissed about that. But I think this clip from JD Vance, I wanted to get your take on this because this is something we hear so much about, the idea of like accelerationism or blackpilling. And like there's a lot of people, I see them in the chat right now. You Rumble great people, but a lot of people pissed off, particularly if you're more
No,
of a
no, no.
populist.
Don't say that. They're not great people. Rumble.
Shitheads.
I literally call them the low IQ Rumble because they are. They are. That's why I speak so monotone over here. I don't want to use big words. It might confuse them.
That's where I'm. I got to keep it to 2 syllables.